Elevated Grapes Podcast.
Elevated Grapes Podcast.
With your host, Sethee.
And
Stylist, Rashi Bindra.
It's time to get started.
Let's talk fashion, shall we?
And I'm your co-host and stylist, Rashi Bindra.
So given that, or actually maybe not a lot of people know that our show, Elevated Grapes, stems, and as I mentioned before, pun intended, stems from wine. Elevated grapes to us is wine. Grapes that are elevated are wine. That was as simple as it got in terms of coming up with the name. So we thought, it'd be important to at least do at least one show on wine as a lifestyle and the business of wine. So we were recently introduced to someone who we thought would be the perfect fit to do that. So we'd like to welcome André to the show. André, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, listen, the pleasure is ours because the information we're about to get from you right now is going to be so valuable to our listeners and to us. Both Rashi and I, we're wine people.
Big time.
It's our drink of choice. So learning about it is only just something that we would love to do. So before we get started, André, I'm going to give a quick introduction to you because your resume, I was doing a little bit of research on what you've done, is incredible. And I think for our listeners' benefit, it's also good for them to know, the person that we're going to be talking to and seeking advice from. So André is a wine writer at andrewinereview.ca, and he contributes to a lot of different outlets such as the Metro, CTV News, CP24, Toronto Sun, Toronto Life, Torontoist, Quench, Global Mail, and News Talk 1010. So the list is incredible of the media outlets that you're involved with. He was introduced to the wine culture. I'm going to be very careful, not wine, but the wine culture at the very ripe young age of 7 when he visited his first winery. At andrewinereview.ca, you can find a podcast called Two Guys Talking Wine, where he does just that, talk wine, which is something we're going to do today. He also has a line called 80X Wine, where they create high quality, small batches of wine. So a lot of fun stuff going on in his world and the world of wine. So thank you, André, for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So we're going to jump right in, man. Tell us a little bit about you and about André Wine Review and how that all came about.
Well, like you said, I got my first taste of wine culture from the age of 7. I actually still have the photo on my desktop, but it is on my Instagram.
That's the
my mom recently sent it to me. So I've traveled and lived in a lot of places. I was raised in Saskatchewan, but I lived in Ontario for 1988 and 89. So that photo was taken in 1989. And it was one of my last memories of Ontario before we moved out to Saskatchewan. I moved back to Toronto in 2007 to work for a bank. Me and the bank had a disagreement of paradigms, and let's just say there's a reason I don't work for banks anymore. But when I moved to Ontario, I got my hands on every bottle of Ontario wine as I could because my dad has been one of those people who just has been singing the praises of Ontario wine industry since inception. So the wine industry in Ontario started in about 1973 with Inniskillen is the OG winery. So in 1988-89, we'd only been making wine for about 15 years, and there were only about 20 wineries in Ontario. So when I moved back here, I needed to see how things had gone. But I moved here in 2007, there was about 150 and a lot of stuff to choose. So I've been to the bottom of many bottles of Ontario wine. Let's put it that way.
So there's a common misconception that Ontario wine sucks. I mean, everybody that I talk to that's a quote unquote wine connoisseur, it's like, oh, you're drinking Ontario wine? You don't know anything about wine. Talk to us about your thoughts on that. I mean, I have my personal opinion, but I've always wanted to
Same here.
Their thoughts on that.
I appreciate even that you worded the question the way that you did, because the fact that Ontario wine sucks is something that I thought was something that existed like with our parents' generation. But I've been writing about wine since 2010 when I started with a weekly segment on News Talk 1010, which is a conservative talk radio station in Toronto. The audience is a little older, and I used to get a bit of blowback because when I started writing about wine, I reviewed only Ontario wine. So the short answer to your question is no, Ontario wines do not suck. Ontario wines are misunderstood, but there is a reason why the market perception exists that Ontario wine sucks. Like the climate down here is so versatile. Like we're not as warm as say Bordeaux, but we're not as cold as say Burgundy. I mean, there's a lot of places in the world where the climate in Niagara is mirrored with climates in other really great wine growing regions. But as a result, I don't think Ontario has really developed a unique identity. If I say New Zealand, you think Sauvignon Blanc. If I say Oregon, you think Pinot Noir. I say California, you think Cabernet Sauvignon. I say Ontario, what do you think? I mean, we make great Cabernet Franc, we make great Gamay, we make great Chardonnay, we make great Riesling. And there's no really king of the hill in terms of what comes from Ontario. So if you've got like your taste in wine like really cut out and like you know what you love, Ontario can be a little overwhelming to hop in. Like the problem isn't that Ontario wine sucks. And I mean, let's face it, no wine region has every winery making every wine great. But I mean, when you have 150 wineries each focusing on a different grape, and then that doesn't even take into consideration styles, it's hard to really establish your identity as a region. And I mean, it's a good or bad thing, because if you love wine as a drink and you're not hung up on one type, like I could go down to Niagara and grab a great Sauvignon Blanc from Melville, where I'm drinking right now, and then go up the street and grab a great Pinot Noir from Rosewood, and go up the street, get a great Chardonnay from Back 10 Cellars, and keep going. But like, yeah, I mean, it's tough to really stand out in the market when it's a noisy party. It's a very noisy party in Ontario.
And is that due to sort of like you mentioned quickly earlier about climate? Like climate in Ontario is good for certain types of wine, certain types of grapes maybe, but given the fact that it's not a specific region with a specific climate to work with, would that be the reason that there's no specific identity?
Well, just to clarify, we do have a specific region with a specific climate and a specific soil type that we work with.
Okay.
But the problem is that like the climate is good enough where it is like Ontario is a cool climate growing region. And I'm not talking about the crappy winters that take place here. I'm talking about like the summer. The growing season is pretty typical of what you get in a good wine growing region. But I mean, it's a story of acidity and just like things being cool. So, you know, we grow really great Cabernet Sauvignon in Ontario, but it doesn't get as hot here as it does in Bordeaux. And it doesn't get as hot here as it does in California. So the wines are going to taste really, really different. You retain acid as the fruit ripens. Your sugars are a little lower, so your alcohol is a little bit lower. You get a completely different style of wine than you would if those grapes were planted somewhere else, right? So, I mean, going back to what I said before, when you talk about identity and style, you know, I have my strong opinions about what I think Ontario should be doing, but I would hate to see a lot of these other really good wineries and styles disappear. Like, my heart belongs to Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And if you're a Chardonnay and Pinot Noir lover, I'm not talking about, you know, your entry-level $20 California Chardonnay, which, by the way, I love. I'm not going to be crapping on my Californians because I love my Californian wine. But I mean, if you give me $25, I'll find you a bottle of wine from Ontario that will destroy anything entry level for Burgundy. You give me $25 from Ontario, I'll give you anything that'll destroy anything Chardonnay anywhere else on the planet. Pinot Noir, you want to talk about where Ontario owns life, and there aren't a lot of really great Pinot Noirs from Ontario at $25, but Thomas Bachelder's Parfum de Niagara. You have to order it from the winery. It's $25 a bottle. I opened that up one night next to a Maison de Belen Pinot Noir. And I'm sorry I'm name dropping, but
no, these
are ones that you need to check out.
No, this is great. Yeah.
And then I'm gonna note these down and then buy these wines.
So the Maison de Belen.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Maison de Belen is a well-respected house in Burgundy. They do a lot of really great entry-level stuff, which is awesome because Burgundy is hard to get affordable wines from. But it's $25. You can get it at the LCBO right now. There's a butt ton of it, so it should be there for a little while. But I did the wine side by side. The Domaine de Belen, hands down, like a really good wine, no arguments there. The wine from Niagara, Thomas's Parfum de Niagara, tasted like it should have been $50. If it said Burgundy on the bottle of that Parfum de Niagara, that would have been a $50 bottle of wine.
So a quick lesson between regions and countries right there.
Yeah, we got to get on a map. I'm sorry, I went super nerd on you guys.
No, but this is really good.
No, we love it.
Exactly. Like, this is great because right off the bat, you're giving us a direct comparison as to what type of Ontario wines are good and why. You mentioned price there, which is incredible. Like, a lot of people think price of wine is correlated with how good it is.
Right.
What is your thoughts on that, Andre, in terms of correlation between the price of wine and how great a wine is?
You know, I've been really lucky that the outlets that I contribute to as a journalist are not for the most part, wine outlets. But if you talk to anyone who loves wine, and we're talking about really loves wine, there's something exciting about finding that $25 bottle of Niagara wine that tastes like $50 Burgundy. And don't get me wrong, there are some like FU bottles in my house that I've spent money on. Like, I've been known to spend $100 a bottle on Paul Hobbs wines because I think those are worth it. Krug Champagne is $300 a bottle, and even as a journalist, I think that's the best $300 you can spend if you can afford it at the LCBO. But my mission is to find those $25 and $30 bottles of wine. And I'll be honest, if we're talking about like price versus quality, so if you break it all down, if you're talking about like $12 and lower at the liquor store, you're talking about a lot of mass-produced wines. And there's some really great stuff happening in that price category, but you're not talking about fine wine. You're not talking about wine made by a dude in a farm. You're talking about wine that's a little bit more chemistry. Like, it's wine that's made to be consistent. And when you start to really love wine, you learn to love that the favorite wine that you're drinking is not going to taste the same every time you drink it. You get that like $12 to $20 range. You're dealing with wineries and people who are focusing more on making great wines, making really good wines. But, you know, to make the business numbers make sense, you have to scale up. So you're still dealing with companies that are making a lot of wine. And in Niagara, we got a few really great examples of it. Chateau des Charmes, Henry of Pelham, Peller, Trius. I mean, these are wineries, like, they're making wine on what is considered a large scale, but they still have a winemaker. All of those wineries have premium lines of their products that are second to none on the market in any category, but they have an entry level where the focus is good quality, but making sure things are budget conscious. Where I spend my money most of the time is $20 and up. $20 to $30 I find the most fun, because that's where you can find those, like, you know, small mom and pop wineries where it's just like they haven't hired ridiculous marketing firms, they haven't partnered with a celebrity. You know, Featherstone in Niagara is one of my favorite examples of that. Their portfolio is bulletproof from like front to finish, and their portfolio is priced from $18 to $30 pretty much across the board. And you're dealing with fine wine. You're dealing with wine, if you want to build a collection, you can save the bottles. You're dealing with wine that if you want to impress someone, who knows a lot about wine, those are the wines you want. When you get above that, it's few and far between where you find wine that's really worth the price. I think the last one that really moved me to my absolute core was a wine called Janzen, which is a Beckstoffer vineyard Cabernet Sauvignon. So Beckstoffer is one of the most famous growers in California. My wife and I spent $215 on a bottle of this wine because I wanted to show her what that region of California tasted like. We poured it into a decanter at 7 a.m. because we knew that we had committed infanticide. We opened this bottle probably 15 years earlier than I should have. And that's another whole snobby thing about whether you should age wine or not. But when I poured it in the decanter, like, it was a closed top decanter, and my whole kitchen smelled like black currants that morning. Oh, wow. The wine was that intense. And it's few and far between when you find that. But $215, buy that wine if you can afford it. Absolutely do that.
And there's a reason that the price is that range too.
There is. I mean, there's a lot of like marketing that goes into that. Like when you're a grape grower, and when you're a winery owner and you're buying fruit from a grower that has a reputation like Andy Beckstoffer, 1 ton of Cabernet Sauvignon to turn into wine, 1 ton will make you 2 barrels. So it'll make you about 600 bottles. 1 ton of grapes from Andy Beckstoffer is rumored to cost between $25,000 and $30,000 American. Wow. To buy a ton of grapes, in Niagara, to buy a ton of really good top shelf Pinot Noir to make the wine that I want to bathe in, you're looking at like $2,500, $3,000.
I love that analogy. I know. I just had a mental image of a bathtub filled with wine. And we're in our own bathtubs and drinking wine on top of that.
Yeah, and Andre in a tie-dye shirt sitting in it.
Oh man, you guys didn't go far enough back on my Instagram. For my wedding, we took a clawfoot bathtub, filled it with ice, and just had bottles of wine in it. We had more bottles of wine at my wedding than people.
I did see that. That's awesome. Maybe your shirt that you're wearing was made with wine because it has some similar color.
Yeah, we got a lot of the red and the yellow. It was kind of sort of thinking about that. I mean, the blues don't really make sense, but we got it.
There's been a real craze recently on these, boxed wines, or even like, for $46 you get like this 4.5 liters of wine of whatever flavor. What are your thoughts on boxed wine?
And even canned wine, like the wine we get in the cans, like
yes, those.
Yes.
I got these wines sent to me by the people who make it. It's a Stellenmar, it's a California Chardonnay, and a Lodi Zinfandel. And I said, fire away, like you guys pitched me. They sent me a note as a writer, which is like, we'd really like you to try this, whatever. And it was just like, just these are the outlets I review for. And if the wines are terrible, I'm going to rip them apart. So if these are sweet, crappy Californian wines, just be warned, send them to me, but there will be honest criticism. I wasn't just going to crap on them. It'd be a fair review. But the problem with entry-level California is a lot of the entry-level, and I'm talking like $20 and under, are a lot of like sweet wines that are not well made. Mm-hmm. Those wines completely blew my mind to tiny little pieces. I don't know whether we're ever going to see a wine, like a really fine Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay. We're certainly not going to see anything from Burgundy ever in a can, but the future of wine is coming in a can. We're going to have to get used to it. It's lighter, it's cheaper. Because it's lighter, it's easier to ship, it's better for the environment. From what I can tell, it doesn't affect the taste of the wines from the Stellenmar wines. But I mean, you have to recognize that wine in itself is not just one thing. Like, it's like marketing. It's like saying you like cars, but comparing a Honda Civic to a Ferrari, right? They're both very, very good cars, but made for different markets, different people, and different purposes, right? So like wine in a can is a thing that you want to buy, take to a picnic, and crush. You're not putting that in your wine cellar to age. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like for that Stellenmar, it's $5 a can. For $15, you get a full can of very decent California Lodi Zinfandel.
Okay. So there is an argument to be made for canned and boxed wine.
Well, boxed wine's great too because you can open it and it's good for 3-4 weeks without the wine going bad. I'll tell you a story. Like I had a box of the Radio Boca. It's a Spanish Tempranillo that was sent to me, and it sat on my dining table for like a month. I was afraid to taste it because I get along really well with the agent. And like I said, I didn't want to open something that I was going to say something really awful about. There was one night I was doing some writing. I just needed one more glass of wine before bed. So it's just like, you know what? Time to see what the Radio Boca tastes like.
You sound like me, one more glass of wine before bed.
Yeah. And it was, but here's the best part. The wine was good. Like, so something a lot of people don't know that happened behind the scenes is up until a couple of years ago, the laws in Ontario were pretty strict on what boxed wine could be on the market. The laws quietly changed, and we're starting to see good boxed wine enter the market. The problem is because that crap has been on the market for so long, it's going to take a long time for a market perception to change. I was at an amazing winery in Beaujolais last year, and they made this fantastic Beaujolais Village, one of my favorite like ways to stretch my money. They were selling it for like €7 a bottle, but it was called Boîte à Gamay. And on the bottle, the design was that of a picnic basket. And I said, Mr. Winemaker, you really should put this in a box. To have like a picnic basket wine that comes in a picnic basket box would be amazing. And he tapped on the shelf behind him. He had a 45-liter bag and box because in France, they make it that size. It's basically the size of a keg for bistros that do high volume sales. But let me tell you, if you can get a 45-liter bag and box of Boîte à Gamay, you should throw a hell of a party when we're allowed to.
I'm going to be listening to this podcast over and over just for selfish reasons.
Yes.
You're dropping some really awesome
names.
So
much information in here.
There's so many awesome names that I got to go note down and then find them. So the other thing that I wanted to ask you was with respect to Ontario wines in specific. That's an area that you chose to feature on your podcasts and your talks and sort of the business realm that you've stepped into. So talk to us about why specifically Ontario wines was the choice. I mean, I'm going to assume part of it's because you're from here, but what was it specifically in Ontario wines you're like, I want to focus and narrow in on this?
It's actually not.
Okay, good.
The origin story is so I still have a day job. I'm insanely busy, but I'm a producer at a news radio station in Toronto where I was doing a weekly segment about wine. Right. And this was after I moved to Ontario, was drinking all the Ontario wine. I was drinking almost exclusively Ontario wine because I knew nothing about wine. Mm-hmm. I was teaching myself about wine. The thing is, the problem with wine culture is there are so many people who put it on this pedestal, and it makes people who are wine curious, and there's that barrier to go from wine curious to wine lover, and to become wine savvy, because a lot of the people who are teaching it, when they talk, and here's the thing is, like, you're asking me questions about things I'm very passionate about, but I know when I go back and listen to this podcast, all I'm going to think is like, crap, like Andre was being a real snobby douche there. I try not to be that guy. If you come to my house for dinner, I might open that bottle of Jansen for you. I hate it when people come to my house for dinner and just like, oh, don't open that. It'll be wasted on me. It's just like, well, you're never going to taste it anywhere else, and you're not going to know to spend the money yourself if someone doesn't teach you and talk to you about it. And it's not about sitting you down and giving you a lecture about it. It's about like sharing an experience and talking about who made it and where it comes from. So when I focus on Ontario, it's because the radio station gave me an opportunity to be a wine journalist, and I wasn't comfortable BSing myself on the radio. I knew enough about Ontario wine that I could do a segment on the radio and know what I did. And when you work in a newsroom, you know how to research and you know how to fact check. And the thing is, I can go back and listen to my radio segments from 10 years ago. And yeah, I didn't know as much as I know now, but I can stand by every word that I've ever written and every word that I've ever said. And that was why I started with Ontario. I didn't branch out until after that. But the thing about that is, you talked about the quality of Ontario wine, was I gravitated to the good stuff pretty quickly, which let me know that I had an aptitude to figuring out what tasted good. But when I started tasting international wines and saw where we stood on the world stage, having already found the good stuff in Ontario, it made it easy to make that leap out of Ontario into learning about other regions.
I think what I really, really liked how you said was, shifting from being wine curious to being a wine lover, because, and I'm sure, Sauter, that's one of the things we've like both faced. We love wine, and we're always curious to keep learning about wine. But there've also been moments when the way it's been taught or spoken about, it can come off as a little bit intimidating and snobby. And maybe that's not the intention, but it can make the person question twice that, oh, if I ask this about this glass or the difference between these two, let's say, red wines or like white wines in front of me, am I coming off as ignorant? And I think nobody likes to feel that way, but I think that's one of the reasons why that shift from wine curious to wine lover sometimes takes a lot longer, because it's that intimidating factor.
And we're really lucky in Ontario, if you live in Ottawa or Toronto, that we have access to wine regions. I think the biggest problem with wine culture that exists, especially in urban centers right now, is the people who hold the knowledge are your sommeliers at restaurants. And I mean, the better the restaurant, the better the wine list, the more knowledge they have. And their job is to sell wine. Getting a sommelier certificate is not easy. I am not a sommelier. I'm thinking about taking the course so I can get the credentials, because it's a big deal. But I mean, you have people who are so passionate and know so much that they forget that there's this huge leap between top to bottom. If you want to learn about wine and de-snobify wine, get in your car, drive to Niagara, drive to Prince Edward County, drive to the Lake Erie North Shore. This is the part of the industry that attracts me the most. Winemaking isn't putting an expensive label on a bottle, putting an expensive cork in it, and pouring it at an expensive restaurant. Winemaking is agriculture. It's growing grapes. If you go down to Niagara and you go to one of the smaller wineries, you'll talk to someone who knows as much about what it takes to make their wine as anyone in any restaurant in Toronto. But that's the guy who was riding the tractor a half hour before you showed up at the winery.
Well, Sauter, we have our summer plans out now. There you go.
And it's a good social distancing activity, so we're going to...
There you go.
It is open air. Most of the wineries are doing tastings outside. It's really exciting to see how the industry is adapting to the COVID crisis right now.
Which is great. So from your experience in talking to Ontario wineries, we'll touch on the COVID topic real quickly, but have they been impacted? Or what's the impact, to them when it comes to the business side of it?
There's so many impacts to it. It's been far-reaching. So you can have your own opinions about the foreign worker program, but most of the wineries and the large wineries in Niagara rely on foreign workers to help them deal with the vineyards. And when you're talking about foreign workers, dealing with a vineyard is not someone who shows up at your farm from Mexico and picks tomatoes. Working in a vineyard requires a specific skill set. And these wineries rely heavily on migrant workers who have been coming back to the wineries year after year to deal with their vineyards. And this spring, it was a late start to spring. So bud break, that's when the vineyards come to life. So when the vineyards come to life from winter, usually happens in early May, late April if it's an earlier. It was a late year this year, but given like everything got locked down March 13th, it took a long time to figure out what was going to go on with the migrant workers. We're seeing right now in the province of Ontario, the outbreaks that are taking place in Windsor are all happening on farms that are run by migrant workers. So there were definitely concerns. Fortunately, we haven't had any in Niagara. So getting the vineyards prepared to deal with this year's crop was a challenge. The second thing was all the restaurants shut down. I have my own wine brand that you mentioned, the ADX Wine Company. Right. I only make two or 300 cases a year, but I sell almost exclusively to restaurants. March 17th, all of my clients were shut down for business.
Right.
And I had to figure out what the hell I was going to do. And that's the same thing for a lot of restaurants. You know, a winery like, a lot of wineries. A winery like Pearl Morissette almost relies exclusively on restaurant sales. You have a lot of wineries that they build their brand on selling to high-end restaurants to help, you know, get that street cred. So people had to pivot. The silver lining, though, is you asked about people thinking Ontario wine sucks. Some wineries saw an increase of direct-to-consumer sales by 6,000%.
That's incredible.
A lot of people don't know you can order from the wineries directly. A lot of them will do free shipping, and with, you know, people not wanting to line up at the LCBO for an hour waiting to get in or a half hour waiting to get in, you phone up your favorite winery, you tell them what you want, and it shows up at your house in a couple of days. And I'd hopefully that will continue as things get back to normal.
So in the Ontario wine region, whether it's Niagara or Prince Edward County, you know, a lot of us can name the major ones, the Inniskillens, the Jackson Triggs, all those sort of things that are available. But how do you, like, is there a listing? How do people find these smaller boutique wines that you mentioned, like, or wineries that you mentioned? Like, it's, you know, you're saying all these names. I'm like, where are they? Like, I would love to know where they are and order directly from them.
So selfishly, let me tell you, AndreWineReview.ca. I try to review as many wines as I can from a broad range, but I'm going to be perfectly honest. I review the stuff that's good and the stuff that I like. But I mean, there's a certain amount of objectivity to it. So if you go to my site, when new stuff comes out and I get a chance to taste new stuff, you'll see what's on my site. I think the best advice that I can give you, like, I could give you the overwhelming, like, go to the VQA. So VQA is the body that governs the Ontario wineries. You can go to the VQA website and take a look at a listing of wineries. But if you go to the LCBO, if you go to the vintages shelves, pay attention to the critic scores, and don't pay attention to the numbers, because I mean, there's certain critics whose scores don't line up with what everything could be. Like, if you see a James Suckling score, for example, and James Suckling is a famous American wine critic who reviews a lot of South American and French wines, but his scores are always in the mid to high 90s. And it's insane how high his scores are. It's like every wine he tastes has scored 90 points. But I mean, that being said, pay attention to the critics that are reviewing Ontario wines. There's quite a few who work for Wine Align. There's myself. There's my podcast co-host, Michael Pincus, and there's a few outlets available. Just pay attention to the critic's name. Most of them have their own websites or have their own sources. And when you want to make that leap, if you're afraid to ask the questions and appear ignorant, do it yourself. Mm-hmm. Take the wine home. Pay attention to the score that's on the site, or go to the website and find the scores that you like and taste it and see if you agree or disagree with the critic. I'm sure that there's wines that I have on my website that the two of you would taste that you'd probably think I'm completely full of crap. And there's no wrong. It doesn't matter how many wines I've tasted. Your opinion's right. Tasting wine is subjective.
Exactly, 100%. Mm-hmm. And that's what, like, I've always said that too. Like, a good wine is relative. It's relative to your taste buds and your perception of what a good wine is.
And your budget.
Yes, of course. So you mentioned tasting on there. So, you know, you hear a lot about wine should be tasted in a specific manner to get the notes out, to get the flavors out. What's your process? What is your process when if I'm sitting down with you at a dinner table and you're saying, okay, I'm going to introduce you to a new wine. How are you going to tell me to taste it? That's what I want to know.
So there's a good friend of mine. His name's Steve Saylor. He is the blind gamer. He's a disability advocate. So yes, I'm shamelessly name dropping because Steve's awesome. You should check out some great content from him.
Awesome.
But he's one of my favorite people to taste wine with because he has a fantastic palate. He knows what tastes good and what doesn't taste good. And I've tasted wine with him a few times. And honestly, I think to get a feel of how to talk about wine with you specifically, it'd probably take a few times of us getting together to do that.
Right.
But with Steve, the first time I drank wine with Steve, I had this amazing bottle of wine I'd forgotten about in my collection. I pulled it out and it's just like, you know what, guys? This is either going to be good or bad. I had 8 people around my table, so it was making sure it was small pours. So everyone got a little bit of the wine. It's just like, right. we're gonna taste this wine and we're gonna talk a little bit about it. Like, no wrong answers. Like, let's just talk about what this wine tastes like. Do we like it? Do we not like it? What does it taste like? By the time I'd gone around the table, Steve was the first glass and his glass was already empty. So when I drink wine with Steve, with someone like Steve, I tell people to not shotgun the wine. There's drinking wine and then there's sipping. Sometimes there's a wine where you're trying to create a moment and have that cerebral moment. But usually at my house, it's just we're drinking. But like if you came over for dinner and I wanted to, and if you, once COVID is done, if you want to come to my house for dinner, I'll be more than happy to open some like cerebral wines.
You up on that.
Some cerebral wines. like let's do it. Let's have the moment. Like, let's talk about why this wine tastes the way it does. Let's talk about where it came from, and who cares about the pretension that goes with it. We can be a little bit pretentious. Like, you know, sometimes you want to watch The Fast and the Furious, and sometimes you want to watch, you know, whatever the Academy Awards have rolled through one year. You don't consume things the same way at the same time.
Exactly.
That's so true.
We're going to take a quick break on that note, and we'll be right back.
So true.
We're going to take a quick break on that note, and we'll be right back. Andre, I forgot to mention to you, we take a break around the 29-30 minute mark, only because we find sometimes with our phones when we're recording on it, it gives, like sometimes it'll conk out and it'll start re-recording it, or stop recording at an odd spot. So we force it to stop and then we just restart again. Perfect. So we were just talking about tasting. Maybe we can go into, we talked about a lot about the Ontario wines. Maybe we can go into a bit about, sorry, go ahead, Rashi.
No, tell me.
I was going to say, either we can talk about the whole red and white, you know, as a choice, or we can talk about maybe your favorite regions and areas outside of Ontario, which I know you touched a little bit on through your comparisons with Ontario. So maybe let's go.
I love it. I know. I just love it.
But I mean, it's a thing that I've learned. I've spent a lot of time really thinking about it in what makes wines different. I can't pick red or white, but you know, we talked about Ontario wine sucks. When someone tells me they think Ontario wine sucks, even now, I ask them, the next question I ask them is, well, what do you usually drink? And often, I'd find probably 4 out of 5 times, the person will be like, well, I love big Italian wines. I love Tuscan wines. I love California wines. It's just like, oh, cool. So this is someone who likes red wines and white wines that are big and like fruit explosions and just super concentrated, whatever. Where the thing with Ontario, because we're a cool climate, the thing with France, because it's a cool climate, the grapes hold on to their acid. So the wines end up more acidic. So for someone who spends all their time drinking really big, bold, fruity wines, wine from a cool climate will be tart. I think we need to find a way. And the thing is, it's impossible. I spent literally 10 years trying to figure out how to talk about this in a non-snobby way. I think the best way to split wine up is whether you like cool or warm climate.
Okay.
And depending on the mood that I'm in, I tend to lean more towards cool climate. But don't get me wrong, like after this podcast is finished, I'm opening up a bottle of big, insanely concentrated Napa Cabernet Sauvignon, because that's what I wanted to drink tonight. That's what I was in the mood for. But you know, I love me my Beaujolais. Beaujolais is acidic. It's tart. It's got a lot of fruit to it, but you know, it's a lot different than what you get in a warmer region. So like the big difference is, like I said, cool climate region, places like Oregon, France, north of Italy, places in Chile, places in south of Australia. I hope everyone's got their maps out. But I mean, you just think about like it's sort of a rule of thumb. If you think of a place that gets cold in the winter, like chances are it's going to be a cool climate region. The wines are going to come off as tart. if you think of a place that's hot year round, like you think of Sicily, or you think of like, I know Tuscany gets a winter, but I have a hard time picturing the Italians wearing a parka. California, you know, Maipo Valley in Chile, your wines are going to be big, bold, and fruity, and it's just a style difference.
I'm going to ask you this is a personal question outside of the business and the wine world. There's a lot of these Spanish wines that like Riojas and that sort of thing have like that punch, like that little kick of that spice at the end. Just personally, I'm asking if you like those kind of flavors.
Totally love them.
Yeah, some of my favorites.
Time and place, but Rioja's a tough one to crack. I mean, Rioja is sort of like, you know, Rioja is like a, you know, it's like the 10-second car from the Fast and the Furious, you know, like it's just so much going on, and it's so flashy. That spice comes from the barrels that they're using. The grapes they use have a lot of tannin in them, but they're just super fruity. I love me my Rioja. And the other great thing about Spanish wines is your money goes really far. You can get a lot of wine for $20-$30.
Yeah. You're right. You're definitely right about that. So you talked a bit earlier in the show about decanters and airing out wines. How important do you think that is, and what types of wines do you recommend that be done with?
I was about to ask that.
Okay, your Spanish Rioja, your Spanish. Okay.
Yes, that definitely
so,
is very bold.
When you're dealing with red wines, you know, you get the tannin from the skin of the grapes when you make it. And I don't know how nerdy you want to get into fermentation and things like that. I mean, that'd be a whole separate nerdy topic.
Nerdify us.
But I'm sure there's a lot of people who are listening to this who have noticed this but haven't really thought about it. If you drink a wine where you crack the bottle and you go and you guzzle it, and Rioja is a great example for this. By the end of your first glass into your second glass, the back of your tongue feels fuzzy. Like it feels like you've got a cotton ball in there.
Right.
That's just because the tannin is basically attacking the back of your tongue and just holding on there. You can decant it, and oxygen is both a wine's best friend and worst enemy.
Right.
So like I told you that earlier when I told you the story about that Jan's in the California cab that I opened for my wife's birthday, we opened that at 7 a.m. because we knew the tannin was going to be out of control on that. And we tasted the wine at 7 a.m. just to see what it was like. If we'd sat and drank that bottle, we would have been profoundly unhappy with it.
Right.
We would have found that that the tannin would have destroyed all the like luscious fruit flavors that were in that wine. We drank that wine at 7 p.m. at night, so it sat in a decanter for 12 hours.
Wow. Okay.
You do not need to do that with most wines. That was like a special wine from a special place with that. Your Spanish Rioja, get home from work at 5, put it in a decanter, or even just open the bottle, leave it on the counter. Here's a fun experiment for you. Taste it like every half hour, and you'll notice that every half hour, that tannin is going to soften, and that wine's going to get smoother and smoother and smoother. And it takes a bit of time to kind of, and a lot of nerdy wine knowledge to kind of be able to guesstimate how long it's going to take for a wine to soften. If you have a young wine, like if you open a young Bordeaux or a young Californian wine, it'll hold up to the oxygen. Some of them will be good for days. I'm sure if I had the patience and I left that Jansen in a decanter, it would have been good for 3 days. And that's an estimate. I could be wrong, but I'll see if I can find another bottle, maybe do a dumb, expensive experiment. But I mean, a few hours in a decanter or a few hours open for most that $20 to $30 wines will smoothen it out if you haven't already aged it in a cellar, hang on, I'll give you guys a quick tour here. These are all wines.
I'm going to say just very quickly for those that are listening on our streaming sites, we're getting a tour of Andre's personal collection of wine right now. And if you want to see it, you got to jump onto the podcast on YouTube so you can see it along with us. Go ahead, Andre.
But all those wines that I just showed you are wines that I'm saving for a special occasion. I'd say on average, I'm aging wines for 2 to 3 years. That whole romantic idea of buying a wine for your child's birthday, those are hard wines to find.
Right.
But people ask me, I just had a kid, I just got married, I want to have something for my 20th anniversary. Those wines are hard to find to be like with absolute certainty it's going to be good in 20 years.
Got you. So you mentioned something there with regards to the aging and holding on to wines. Is there specific flavors and specific types of wines that you recommend people, if they buy a bottle, they hold on to and wait a while for it before they open it?
Yeah, if you love big, bold wines, if you love your warm climate wines, fill your boots. Go buy anything. Like even decent entry-level California might evolve in a cell. Actually, let me take back what I just said. if you like the big bold red wines, Chile is a great place to go because it's a country. Wines. Yeah, and I mean it's a country where you know how I kind of did the breakdown of like how your wine is made. The problem with Chile is you don't have a lot of that like really craft feel to it. It's a lot of really large companies that own wineries and own a lot of land and kind of split their portfolio up. But as a consumer, and as a consumer who's new to wine and maybe cares more just about the quality of the juice and not as much about the story, Chile is a great way to build a wine collection. Montes is one of my favorite wineries. The Montes Alpha Cabernet Sauvignon is $19.95 a bottle at the LCBO or 21. It's a lot of money for some people, but for people who love wine, it's go buy like 5 bottles of it, drink one every year for 5 years, and it's such a cool way to build a collection without spending a crap ton of money.
You were talking about decanters, and we're talking about letting a wine breathe and giving it that, you know, especially the bolder wines that are out there. Now, a lot of times when you go to a restaurant and there's pairing suggestions, you know, you should have this type of wine, this type of meal. But some of these wines may be these bolder wines that need a little more time to air out or be in a decanter. You know, if you're sitting down for a meal over the course of 40 minutes, an hour, hour and a half, it may not give it that time where it's the most recommended type of wine for that meal. So how does that specifically work, and what are your recommendations in that scenario?
I've been on the record as saying, for the most part, wine and food pairings are kind of BS.
I love it. Share more.
but it's also, I'll be honest, it's also the reason why I gravitate towards cool climate wines is because of that acidity. So the wine I'm drinking right now is a Fumé Blanc from Meldville. It's a Sauvignon Blanc from Niagara, about $20 a bottle.
I just did a screenshot. I'm good.
It is crazy high. Send it here. Crazy high in acid, but like really nice, like lychee flavors, tropical flavors, a little bit of grapefruit in there.
Sounds amazing.
But the cool thing about it was because of the acid, it'll go with most food. Like I'm after we're done this, before I open my Napa Cab, because I think a lot of people would think that my dinner would pair with a Napa Cab, is I'm gonna grill some burgers tonight, and I want me my high acid with it because it is hot as Satan's balls in Toronto today. So I want a cool white wine to go with that. Champagne pairs with just about everything. And the thing is, when you start getting into those tannic ones, like you said, the Riojas, you know, there's logical pairings, you know, things with a lot of tomato sauce. You're still getting your acid in there, and it's, you know, there's going to be some sort of meeting when you get the food and the wine together. I don't know, my big bold wines, I love those wines. I love my Riojas. I love my Napa Cabs, but I'm very rarely drinking those with food. I'm usually drinking those on their own, because they're a meal in themselves. Cool climate wines are meant to go with food. That's sort of my bottom line there. And if you don't like the wine with your food, set the wine aside. There's a blog post on andrewinereview.ca. I had a really nice bottle of Bordeaux sent to me, and I was having a sashimi bowl for dinner. I was having a nice lettuce bowl with some beautiful sashimi grade tuna that I cut up, and it was a little Korean flavor, so gochujang and pineapple juice and cucumbers and just some nice acid in the bowl. The moment that wine hit my mouth after taking a bite of the sashimi bowl, it was just like, that is a nope. Like, that is not it. So I took the wine, I set it aside. The wine was my dessert. That was it.
Got it. Yeah. Sometimes you got to do that too, and especially if the flavors don't really work with the food too, because that happens. Sometimes you'll pick a wine because you want to try the wine, but then you're eating something and these things don't work well together, or the wine's not ready to be drank yet, and you gotta wait on it.
Yeah, totally.
So one of the things you mentioned to me before we actually started the show was that there's the wine part of it, but there's also the stemware. That's really So you shared that you had some insight on that. So share with us your insight on the importance of stemware and the type of glass you're using for the type of wine you're drinking.
I try really hard to de-snobify wine. I know I've gone full snob on you guys, but I really hope that the approach is coming across as I want to encourage people to ask questions as opposed to intimidate. And in wineries in Europe, I've drank some of the finest juice I've had in my life out of the IKEA $1 like juice glasses, because that's just what they had at the winery.
Yep.
But
those are the wine glasses I have at home. So
this is not a shout out. They do not pay me, but this is a Zalto Burgundy glass. It goes for $80 a piece. And the thing is, I don't know if you guys are musicians. I see the records on your wall there.
Yep.
But having the right wine glass is sort of like having a really good guitar and plugging it into like the perfect amplifier.
Got you.
You know, like a really great Gibson Les Paul will sound good no matter what you plug it into. But you get a good Gibson Les Paul and you plug it into a nice Marshall stack, you know, you get that marriage. It's kind of like wine and food pairing. So I have 3 types of wine glasses I keep in my house. I have a smaller one I use for white. I have Burgundy glasses that I use for Burgundy. And frankly, I'll admit it's because of living in Ontario and how serious I take my Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Then I have my Bordeaux glasses. So the Bordeaux glasses, it's not just for Bordeaux wine, but for anything big, bold, and red, it goes into a Bordeaux glass. And if you come to my house for dinner and we open 3 different wines from 3 different regions, I will change the stemware on you.
Got it.
And don't feel bad for me. I have had to wash many a wine glass in my day just to make sure that the wine shows best in the glass. But if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, I don't have the right wine glasses, don't stress about it. If you had to pick one, I would suggest getting a big Bordeaux glass. Your white wine glasses will do in it. I would definitely recommend investing in some decent stemware. Like go to Winners, go to Marshalls, buy a set of Riedel glasses.
Right.
The Zaltos were a wedding gift. I just use them as they're paper thin and they kind of look nice.
Yeah, it actually it makes me want to drink a nice glass of wine right now. Just
But yeah, that's the only thing I refuse to be unsnobby, refuse to de-snobify myself, just because it does make a big difference on what a wine tastes like. But if you're listening to this, like seriously, don't stress about it. Don't feel like you have to go buy the 3 types of wine glasses. Just invest in a decent wine glass. And if you're used to drinking out of the IKEA glasses, go to Marshalls, buy yourself a set of Riedel glasses. Take the same wine port and what you're used to drinking out of, and the new stuff. Trust me, you'll know a difference.
What about the stemless wine glasses? I mean, those are quite popular now too.
No.
Thank you.
No.
Listen. It's the other thing. It's the other thing that I'm sort of not snobby about. Like serving wine in a stemless glass is just like if you went to a restaurant and they brought you a soup that was cold, that was bone cold, you'd be kind of pissed about that. The temperature at which you serve wine is an important thing, and a stemless glass just messes with the taste of the wine. You put your hand on it, it's warming up to your hand temperature. And the thing is, you don't want your red wine at 37 degrees. You don't want your white wine at 37 degrees. Those glasses just shouldn't exist. Be careful with your stems and just get a proper stemmed glassware.
What's the proper etiquette in holding a wine glass? Just you can show us or just tell us at the same time.
I hold it by the stem. Once again, it has to do with temperature. If you hold a glass like this, you're going to warm the wine up. And it does happen quicker than people realize. You know, I'm the master of walking around and just swirling the wine. You swirl the wine because, like I said, wine oxygen is a best and worst friend of a wine. I swirl the wine to just get that exposure to oxygen and hopefully unlock some more of the flavors and aromas from it.
I'm terrible at swirling. I end up dropping it all over the place.
It's okay. We just got to practice. I'll come coach you. I'll shout slogans at you. I'll shout slogans at you while you're swirling.
I have a membership at a wine club downtown, so we'll have to go there one day, and we're gonna each grab a bottle and bring it over, and we're gonna compare notes on the different types of wines we're drinking.
Would love to do it anytime.
Andre, I want to know more about you and we talked a lot about wine, so thank you. This is amazing insight. I want to know more about you and sort of the business of wine that you're in. You have Andre's Wine Review. You do a lot of writing and features on many different media outlets. You have your own podcast that talks, and thank you for that, because now that I know it exists, I'll actually listen to it because I'm inside on wine.
It's horribly nerdy. I'm afraid it would scare you guys away. But if you want to know what's going on in the Ontario wine industry, but like by all means, I'd be happy to have you listen to it.
We would love to. Listen. So tell us a little bit about your journey into the business of wine.
So are you asking about ADX, like my own wine?
We're going to get into ADX in a minute, but I was talking more about sort of like your business of reviewing wines, being on outlets and doing the podcast. Like, how did that come about? Why is that important to you, and why did you choose that as a direction for your business?
Sorry to every winery and publicist that's ever sent me a bottle right now, but I'm about to tell you I did it because I wanted to drink for free. When the radio station put me on the air in 2010, obviously I took it very seriously, and I've always taken it very seriously. So to the publicists and wineries who sent me stuff, it's important that you know that I've always taken the craft of writing very seriously, because I come from a journalism background,
Right.
you know, integrity is critical to me. But a couple years into reviewing, because I was paying for all my wine that I was reviewing when I was doing on the radio station, like 2 years into it, like 2012, I started to realize, oh crap, if I want to review something, I can send a media request to someone and they'll send it to me for free. And I've always made sure to write about stuff that's sent to me, especially if I've asked for, if I've asked for it. So here's the thing: is if you're a publicist or media or a producer, and I'm asking you for product, it's because I want to give you exposure.
Perfect.
But I'll be honest, like the journey started with me just wanting to drink for free. I worked in radio. There wasn't a lot of money in it. And, you know, to be 26 years old, drinking some of the best wines in the province and not having to pay for it, like, it's a pretty good perk.
That's incredible, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had to drink a lot of bad stuff. And it didn't take me long to realize that, like, out of all those bottles that I gave you guys a tour of my place earlier, I have a different section of my apartment set aside for samples that are sent to me because I do have deadlines, especially for Toronto Life. But if I open a wine and it's not good, it goes down my sink. And I know for a lot of people who, I'm fortunate enough to get free wine. But like when people come to my house for dinner, if you come to my house for dinner, we open up a bottle of wine, it's not good, you'll be appalled to watch me just dump it down the sink because life's too short to drink bad wine.
I love it.
I love that.
That's perfect. I think Rashi's going to write that on her wall.
Yes, I have a poster. So I actually have a door hanger, and it was a gift, and I still have it, even though I've moved houses. It says love, laughter, and really good wine. So I wake up every morning and I see that, and that's one of my goals. You always have to have good wine in life.
Totally, and good wine means a lot of things, right? Like that's the best part about it.
Exactly. So talk to us a little bit about, as you mentioned, and we were talking briefly about ADX, which is your line of small batch wines.
Yeah,
talk about ADX.
I would just correct terminology a little bit. I'm a virtual winery. It's not a line. No one makes it.
Thank you.
No one makes it for me. So virtual winery, and if you're listening to this in the States, like the vocabulary is a little different depending on where you are, but like some wineries will call it custom crush. But in 2015, I got one of the top 10 most drunks I've ever gotten in my life with a winemaker from Niagara, and we're very good friends now. But you know what it's like when you're young and stupid, and I guess we're all still young and stupid, but like when you're 25 and you're just like, yo man, it'd be such a good idea if we did this. And this is literally how the conversation was like. It was just like, listen man, like I want to learn what it takes to grow some grapes, ferment it and put it in bottle and get it to market. Like I want to do it. And he was just like, yeah man, let's do it. And it's just like, man, I want to make Gamay Nouveau because Beaujolais Nouveau has such a terrible reputation. We make good Gamay. And I'm just like, yeah man, let's do it. I woke up the next morning with like a 6-alarm hangover and a phone call from my winemaker Vadim, and he was just like, so man, are we doing this? Yeah, when are we just like it was just like, okay, if you're serious, I'm serious. So 2015, I had to contract a grape grower, find a grape grower to work for me. When you're a virtual winery, it means I rent my vineyards, I rent my space at a winery. So I had to find a winery to let me work in their backyard. So Rosewood was where I started. And in 2015, we started making wine and selling to restaurants. It was the best and dumbest decision I've ever made in my life.
Well, you're still doing it 5 years later, so yeah. It's got to be a good decision.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's it. There's not a ton. Here's the thing is you talk about lifestyle, you get into the wine business. There's not a lot of money to be made at it, but, you know, we talk about learning about wine. I've fallen deeply and just like deeply and completely in love with the people who make wine because there's such a passion. And the thing about making wine is it's not about sending a product. It's not like growing a tomato because people need tomatoes. People need tomatoes to eat. And don't get me wrong, with that type of agriculture, there's a passion that goes with it. If you're a wheat grower, you want to make sure you make the best wheat so it makes the best hot dog buns on the planet whenever it becomes flour and ends up in the person. But when you make wine, people don't need wine. You don't need grapes. The whole purpose of what you're doing is you're creating something to bring joy to people's life. I know that the first bottle of wine I sold to a restaurant, it was at the Chase in Toronto. And my wife was working at the Chase, which is one of the reasons I had the inn. And she told me the first customer who bought my wine was an older couple who were celebrating their anniversary. And they wanted a bottle of Beaujolais Nouveau. They had no Beaujolais Nouveau on the menu, but they had my Gamay Nouveau. And my wife came home and told me that this couple got to have my wine for their anniversary. And now I know that a little piece of my heart and soul got to be a part of someone else's occasion that day. And that's why I do what I do. And that's why anyone who makes wine, especially those small producers, that's why they do what they do.
That's incredible. That's such a touching story, and that's such an amazing reason to want to do that business.
Yeah.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about. So you talked about it's a Gamay Nouveau. What kind of flavor profiles can people expect from ADX? Okay, so
ADX. This is when I say worst decision. So Gamay Nouveau, we did very little to the fruit. This is where the business side takes over. So a really great winery are people who understand the intersection between business and art. Nobody wants to make wine for the intention of losing business, but I'm never going to be making Ferrari money. But at the same time, I can't be foolish with my money. When I took it to the restaurants, I was so excited to have Gamay Nouveau. So Gamay Nouveau is a wine it's typically the first wine released from the vintage. It used to be really popular in the 80s. It's generally considered garbage wine. French people, I love Beaujolais Nouveau. I continue to love Beaujolais Nouveau, but my French friends, I have one French friend who actually told me that Beaujolais Nouveau is for hobos. But Beaujolais Nouveau is kind of like the anti-wine. So it comes out the third Thursday in November, every year the third Thursday in November. And historically, it was a wine created by the vintners in Beaujolais to help repay the people who helped them with the harvest. So it takes about 8 weeks for it to go from grape to wine. But because of how it's made, and there's nothing wrong with how it's made, like it's a style, it preserves these like really light, bright, fruity flavors, but the wine deteriorates in bottle. And I'm going on a long tangent to say what you expect from ADX, but the bottom line is the marketing side of it, none of the restaurants in the city cared that we had taken the Beaujolais Nouveau style, made it in Ontario, and they held on to the product. They wanted to put it on their wine list in January, and it's just like, well, no, the wine's supposed to be consumed by the end of December. We got phone calls from restaurants saying that the wine was re-fermenting, so we had to take all of our wine back that was spoiled because I didn't want a reputation for selling bad wine.
Of course.
I took a $4,000 bath that year. I had to open about 400 bottles of Hair of the Dog Gamay Nouveau by hand and dump them down my business partner's kitchen sink.
Oh my goodness!
So we regrouped.
That probably hit hard that year.
Yeah.
Like it hurt. Like just doing it probably hurt.
It did. But when we saw that there was an interest in what we were doing in the first place, the fact that we did good sales, even though we had to walk them back, it was just like, okay, right brand, right business, wrong product for the climate, wrong product for the region. And then we just said, okay, rosé's been getting better every year. People are drinking rosé. We love rosé. There's not enough Pinot Noir rosé from Niagara. I think we should make Pinot Noir rosé. And in 2017, which was a very, very hard growing year. That's the other fun thing about being in the wine business is you contract your grower and you pray for the best. And sometimes in a tough summer, because it's too wet or too hot or too cold, the fruit shows up at your crush pad to turn into wine, and you're dealing with like insects or just fruit rotting on the vine. Like there's just so many things. In 2017, my grapes showed up and was just like, man, what the hell are we going to do? And that's the other thing is if you're in business for yourself or you're in business to make money, if you don't know something, don't fake it. Make sure you've got the right people working for you. And that winemaker that I got hammered with, he looked at the fruit, was just like, no problem, we got this. And in 2017, I made one of the best rosés, in my opinion, that the province of Ontario got to see in the summer of 2018. And the restaurants in Toronto agreed. I made 100 cases of that wine. I sold it out in 2 months.
Wow.
It's a great story, and we're looking forward to trying some of the ADX when we get together.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, that's it. Listen, I know we're in a COVID time, but I'm going to be dropping a couple of bottles off to you guys in the week.
100%.
The rosé is sold out, but I'd love to hear what you think of it's called When Pigs Fly, and that's what we do.
That's an awesome creative name too.
Yep.
Awesome. So Andre, thank you so much for being on the show today. Your insight is incredible. I can see why people turn to you to give them insight on sort of the wines and the different types of options available and giving your reviews. So to have that on our show is an honor. So thank you so much for your time. And
thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. If you don't mind me turning it around on you just for 1 second, because I know you talked about the fear of snobbiness. Is there any like one question that you're dying to ask but you've been too afraid to because someone would think that you're ignorant?
About specifically about wine or in general?
Specifically. Oh yeah, no. I mean specifically about wine. Specifically about wine. Come on, you've got me on the line right now. I've made it very clear that we can talk about anything, and I will try to de-snobify it for you. You got anything for me?
In all honesty, like, sometimes people talk about notes in wines and flavors in wines, and I've been to numerous wine tastings, and I kid you not, sometimes for the life of me, I'm sitting there and they're like, do you feel or taste this note or this hint of this flavor? And for the life of me, I cannot taste it. I'm like, I don't know what the heck you're talking about. It's not there. My taste buds are dead. Someone put a needle in my mouth and there's no taste buds left because everybody in the room is nodding yes. So I'm just nodding along, with it just because I feel like
okay.
So like it's sometimes, and it's hard for me to pinpoint a specific wine or a specific grape that happened with. But is that like when they say wines, it's the flavor or the if you like a wine or don't like a wine, it's all perspective. But can that happen? Like, can different people taste different things in the wine and maybe not taste certain things in the wine that you're meant to taste, or is that just
100%? 100%. Everyone's taste buds are different.
That's my ignorant question for the day.
No, that's not an ignorant question. That's a great question, and it's a problem with the wine culture is you got that confirmation bias where you'll sit in a room. And I love tasting wine with other people where they'll just be like, oh my God, this smells like a fruit roll-up. And it's just like, oh crap, I thought it smelled like cherry pie, but no, it smells more like fruit roll-up.
Right.
But here's the thing. If you want to get serious about wine, you want to get serious about wine, here's something that I do for myself. And it's sort of like you can train your mouth like an Olympian. I'm lucky I live at Davisville. I got Fanfare Flowers up the street, and they have a wide selection of tropical fruit. And I'll go in there sometimes, and I just buy fruit and vegetables that I'm not used to eating to just taste it, to be like, okay, I'm working that muscle. This is what passion fruit tastes like. This is what papaya tastes like. This is what gooseberries taste like. This is what the little tiny bananas taste like versus the big giant ones. This is what a Californian grapefruit tastes like versus a Florida grapefruit. And like the more stuff you taste, it's just like, if you want to get serious about wine, when you taste something, just really think about what those flavors taste like. And when you do that, you can do that. Do it with spices too. I'm a Chardonnay fanatic. I love it with Chardonnay. Chardonnay will smell like baking spice, and sometimes it's hard to pinpoint it. So I pull out the allspice. I pull out the nutmeg. I mean, if you want to get really serious, like you just got to work the muscle. If you don't want to get serious, who cares? If you don't get the notes, if it's delicious, swallow it. But if it's delicious, swallow it. Who cares if you're detecting the notes of coffee or apple or lemon? Like, just if it tastes good, swallow it. Who cares if you're detecting the notes?
Well, that's just it. Like, I mean, that's what I do. Like, if I like the wine, I'll drink it. But it's just more like, am I missing something as part of the experience? Because
you're not.
You're supposed to taste these things. I'm like, I don't taste it.
You are not. You're absolutely not. And here's the thing: the more you drink, the more you taste, the more you'll get to understand the different profiles. But like that's something you have to convince me to do. Drinking wine is a fun activity for me.
Yeah.
Almost daily sometimes.
It is.
Yeah, I'm sorry that we had to do this apart, because like I've been crushing this one bottle by myself, but I feel like we would have gone through 2 or 3 if we were together. So thank you for having me.
I think our next sit down we'll have you on the show again, and that time we're going to do it in person, and we'll actually go through some wine tastings with you.
Would love to do that. I'll tell you what, I'll bust out the Zoltos for you guys.
Perfect. Listen, man.
Ooh.
You just the fact that I get to sit with you and experience it the way you are going to explain us to experience it. I mean, doesn't matter what the wine is to me, because I would love to go through that experience with you and understand it from your perspective. Like how am I supposed to be tasting this? Not necessarily what I'm going to taste, because I may be like, yo, Andre, I can't taste this. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. But just to go through that and just have that experience with you. That
experience, so yeah.
The answer to that question, by the way, is, well, tell me what you're tasting, and
exactly.
And if you tell me like one thing, I'll come back to you and say that's not good enough. I'll make you think about it, and it's just like I don't want people to agree with me. I don't want people to agree with me, but I want people to think about it. Think about it. If it's one of those cerebral wines, if it's the Jansen, if I bring the Jansen to the table, I want you to think about it, because I spent $215. I've earned that extra minute from you.
Yeah, you owe me the thinking part of your brain.
Yeah, you owe it to me at least for a minute.
Exactly. Rashi,
I'm excited about this.
What's your ignorant question?
Oh, I'm gonna ask one as well. Okay.
Yeah, 100%.
So, okay. So here's the thing. I got used to drinking rosé.
Good for you.
I prefer it on the drier side, because I've tasted some that are extremely sweet, and I, very, very quietly spit it out because it's too sweet for me. But I will finally admit that. But there's always been this thing where like rosé is just red and white wine mixed. And I've never been able to understand truly what is rosé and why it's become like this big craze amongst people to drink it. That's my question, guys.
I'm about to blow your mind, and it's not an ignorant question. I'm about to blow your mind. Most good rosé. Did you know that you can make white wine from red grapes?
Okay.
No.
Not at all.
So the color from red wine comes from skins. So when you make a red wine, you press the juice. Like you put the grapes in a press, you press the juice, but then you let the juice sit on the skins and you extract the color from it. So real proper rosé. So my rosé, when Pig's Flies made the Pinot Noir, what we did was we pressed the juice and we let the juice sit on the skins for a very short time, just enough to get a little bit of the red flavoring from it, like a little bit of that like strawberry and watermelon. So roast rosé. There is rosé on the market that's red and white mixed, and there are some places that take it seriously, but I would say for the most part, if your rosé is like a Merlot Riesling blend, you're not talking about real like pinky up serious snobby rosé. But rosé is just it's wine that's it's lazy red wine. It's a deliberate choice, but it's red wine that didn't sit on the skins for days. It's like I made Pinot Noir this year. I made a proper red Pinot Noir. It's sitting in a barrel at the winery where I'm renting space. It sat on its skins for 3 weeks to get the color and get the flavors from the skins.
Got it.
So that's where rosé comes from. The color comes from the skins. It's not red and white wine mix. And you're on the right track drinking dry rosé, because sweet rosé just makes you hungover. And
yeah.
You know what? I've always been shy sometimes to order rosé by myself because I'm still unsure of this. So usually the best rosés I've had is when somebody else has like ordered it for me, and I'm like, this is perfect. And I'm still not good at buying rosé from an LCBO because I'm like, is this too sweet? I prefer it more dry because I know if it's too sweet, I'm gonna end up throwing up. So like, yeah, that's my experience with rosé.
I don't know how much time we have left, but Rashi, at the LCBO, so when you take a look at the tag of every wine, they have the sugar content. What you're looking for sugar content if you don't want something to be too sweet. So about 10 grams per liter, you'll start to taste it, but 10 grams per liter I'd still consider to be a dry wine.
Okay.
A bone dry wine is 4 grams per liter of sugar or less. So when you look for a rosé, if it's 4 grams per liter or less, it will be bone dry. It'll taste bone dry. If it's 10 grams per liter or less, you'll start to notice the sugar. You can get up to like 15 or 18. I'd be happy on a day where it's as hot as Satan's balls outside with a 15 to 18 gram per liter rosé at my house, but that's probably because I'm going to just drink it out of the bottle like a beer and then regret it the next day. But 10 grams
get along very well.
10 grams per liter or less is a good rule of thumb if you're looking for dry wine. And that's across the board, whether it's red or white, or rosé. That's how to find a dry white wine.
Thank you.
There's a wine I actually just tried recently, and I don't know, Andrew, if you're familiar with it. I think it's a strawberry picking farm, and they have a winery in their premises as well.
Okay.
I think it's Andrew's Farm.
Andrew's Farms
in Milton.
Yeah, that's what you were telling me.
Yeah, so it's a place I went, and so they have like they have a they call it their standard red and their standard white, and then they have one that's a black currant, which I found to be really good. But their rosé, so they have it's called Raspberry Rouge.
Okay.
It's their version of a rosé. I'm not sure if you've ever tried that one or if you're familiar with it.
I've not, and I'll be honest, I don't do a lot of fruit wines, but I'm not opposed to them. Coming from Saskatchewan, we don't have grapes out there, but there's a winery out west called Living Sky that makes a wine out of rhubarb.
Okay. That
would be a dead ringer for a Riesling if people weren't drinking it, but I'll check it out. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a little bit on the sweeter side. I actually didn't check the sugar content, but I found it to be amazing. Like, it was just so flavorful. And
there's nothing wrong with drinking sweet wine. If you like sweet wines, drink sweet wines. Is like I said, I want to get rid of that. I do want to get rid of that snob factor. And here's the thing: if you come to my house and you bring a sweet red wine and that's what you want to drink, please don't be offended if I open something else. I'll be happy to share. I'll be the good house guest. I'll be polite. We'll share. But when you get together with people, open up a few bottles. You're not all gonna like everything, It's like trying to order out food. Like, you know, these jans that I've been talking about for the money I spent on it, maybe one of you would just hate it and find it a little bit too much or not enough or too astringent or something. Like we're not all going to like the same stuff.
So the other ignorant question I was just thinking as I was talking about this place. So as we were buying the bottles, it was me and my brother-in-law. The lady at the counter had mentioned that their reds are actually better tasted when they're a bit chilled, which was the first time I've ever heard that. And she said the reasoning behind that is that it's because there's a bit of a fruit. Their wine's a little bit on the fruitier side. So she goes, it really brings out those flavors, and because it's a slightly sweeter wine, and it wasn't too sweet, so I didn't mind it. I'm not a big super sweet wine fan either, but it wasn't too sweet. It was enough that I could manage. But it, like, having it chilled, it just like I didn't feel like I was missing something because it wasn't a room temperature red wine or whatever the case. It was actually quite delicious when it was chilled. So have you, like, I mean, is that a common thing when it comes to wines with a bit of more of a fruit flavor profile?
That is like Jedi Master level wine tasting. I toss my reds in the fridge, especially when it's this hot outside. You don't want to chill them to fridge temperature, but I drank a Beaujolais Village last night, and like I said, cool climate, so higher acids, a little bit tart. When you put like a cool climate, like lighter red wine in the freezer for like a half an hour before you open it, it's like putting it on steroids. It's so awesome.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: is if you don't like it, like if you're so comfortable with drinking, you know, room temperature red wines, you know, it's not a big deal. The wine can warm up. Chilling a wine and warming it up, like if you put a red wine in the fridge and it gets too cold, like you're not going to hurt the wine by chilling it and doing it. You don't want to let your wines get too hot though. Like don't, like if you're.
But we drank it chilled, and it was incredible. Like
chilled red wines is, like I said, like that'll make you like Obi-Wan Kenobi if you show that party trick to your friends. Just be like, hey guys, check this out. I'm gonna make this like Pinot Noir taste like friggin' like cherry pyrotechnics, but I gotta put it in the freezer for half an hour.
That's awesome. Again, man, Andrew, thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much.
I'm actually gonna re-listen to this podcast just to go back and order those wines. I mean, I know I could probably just message you and ask you, but it's fun this way to listen to it and get the backstory. So when I'm drinking it, I'm like, all right, this is what he was talking about. This means a lot. We will definitely sit down and do this again in person with actual bottles of wine in front of us and going through the tastings with you. But this is incredible. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely, likewise. And to our listeners, thanks so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week on Elevated Grapes.
Hey guys, thank you for watching that podcast or that video. If you like what you hear and you want to hear more of us and see some of our behind the scenes stuff, subscribe below.
Yes, hit that little red button thingy that's over there and hit subscribe and keep following us for a lot more cool fun stuff.
Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you soon.